Welcome to Conversations with the Authors.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Conversations with the Authors. I'm your host, Daniel.
And I'm Daryl.
And I'm Sandra.
And thank you so much for pressing the play button. And thank you, Alexander Nakarada, for the amazing intro, as always. Today we're going to talk about social commentary. Remember, this is a non-scripted podcast. We have notes, but no script, and we're just sort of chit-chatting with each other. So this is not a TED Talk, so don't expect a lecture, but really just our personal opinions and how our co-hosts, Daryl and Sandra, and their highly rated, maybe
one day, right?
Maybe Oscar winners.
We'll get Oscar one day.
Aaron Coffer nominated novel, How Nicholas Became Santa Claus, utilized some of this social commentary and a few other things that we can think of that may have done the same thing.
I want to sit in the aisle seat.
Right. What do you consider social commentary to be?
Well, social commentary can take the form of satire. It can take the form of a direct confrontation. But usually in this case, we're talking about stories that kind of tell a story about society, but kind of in a way that you have to unravel, and it's kind of hidden and subtle.
Yes, and science fiction is, Sandy, you would probably agree with this, it allows authors to explore hypothetical scenarios, things that, wouldn't normally happen in, evasion, alternate futures, commentary on present-day issues, things like that, but sometimes in a subtle or not so subtle fashion, yeah?
Exactly.
And what's your thoughts on this in fantasy fiction and science fiction writing?
Well, I look at social commentary as social reflection, as
like that.
Societal reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to use science fiction or fantasy fiction, even better, to apply the same reflection to the characters in the story and let them either solve the problem or make it worse or just totally ignore it.
I think when you're using science fiction, you have the luxury of taking something to the extreme.
Right.
Okay.
You can do you can use Grandpa Wroblewski's rule of don't apply your tool to anything that the tool was supposed to be used for.
Right.
So
Right. And now, writing How Nicholas Became Santa Claus, this science fiction fantasy novel of yours, which I've been heard from, if you don't know this, I've heard from readers who say this is even better than Harry Potter. So my question is, did you go into writing How Nicholas Became Santa Claus with social commentary in mind, or was it something that sort of evolved naturally with the story?
Sometimes I think when you're writing a story, you may have an idea where you're going to go, but as the story writes itself, sometimes you surprise yourself, because I did put some social commentary in there. And it's, I think, something Obama once said about changing the society fundamentally.
Right.
And you'll find that phrase in the story, and this is something that I believe the bad guy said it.
Right.
So, not to say that.
Right. But, in a story that has to do with, kings and queens and subjects and oddlings and, our heroes fighting the bad guys, you inevitably come across things like classism and indifference. And with your oddlings, you have something that you focus a lot on diversity. And these are a lot of issues that you tend to talk to.
I think the social commentary develops as the characters develop. They make the commentary. They make, by their action and their interaction with each other, they either present or break down.
Right. Just to tap into something you said about reflection, because it reflects the society at large in some ways, because we talk about we talk about greed.
Yes.
And we talk about avarice. We talk about love. We talk about a want and desire.
But we also talk about war and we talk about betrayal and deceit.
And we get to show how devastating those things can be. And we get to take it to the extreme because it is science fiction.
Right. And I think it's important to note that that social commentary is not always about focusing on the thing that's not working in society.
Right.
I think sometimes social commentary, and this is just my opinion, can be about pointing out things we're doing right.
It can.
You know, and the story of Nicholas, we have, of course, Nicholas, who becomes the man Santa Claus, as the story, title, says, he's about kindness. He's about showing kindness to people and individuals and oddlings and such, and trying to spread that message of love and, acceptance.
But
and
obviously, in a story, there's always conflict.
Right.
So we've got if that's the yin, we've got the yang, too.
Which would be our, antagonist and his want for power and the ways he's going about it, whether they're, good ways or not.
Mm-hmm. And I think we have a tradition in writing of making social commentary. Mm-hmm. I think it's almost, in some ways, it's almost a responsibility, and sometimes you can't even help doing it. Even when you go back to a story like 1984 by George Orwell, mm-hmm. It was a very dystopian novel on totalitarianism mm-hmm. and surveillance and manipulation of the truth. And I suppose he took it to extremes because he saw these things developing in our own society. Right. Or you could even go back to Brave New World by Alex Huxley. His novel explored societies controlled by technology and consumerism and mass conditioning.
Yeah, so we see that, say, in the movie AI that we had with Will Smith, and we have The Creator that had just recently come out. We got episodes of Star Trek that talked about I think it was Balance of Terror. It talks mm-hmm. about the dangers of nuclear war. Mm-hmm. Or nuclear, depending on who you are.
Right.
And,
right.
It's a nuclear war. Right. It's a nuclear war.
But we also see it in our cartoons, yes. in Bugs Bunny fighting Hitler, in the Transformers fighting themselves from a different world, but on our world, and other cartoons like the Pink Panther and.
Well, social commentary, you almost can't help because we're not, as writers and as readers, we're not immune to it. It's right. The society affects us, and it affects the way we think and the way we write, and that will seep into your right. writing, and that's not bad.
And I guess inevitably, whether you want to or not, you start talking about it.
Right, and as writers, we're reminding ourselves and our readers not to take everything so darn seriously.
Right.
And at other times, we want you to take something deadly serious. It depends on what we're after.
We talked about diversity in your story with the oddling characters, and going back to Star Trek, we had an episode called not we, but most viewers had an episode called "Let That Be Your Last Battlefield," and this is where they explored the dangers of racism, prejudice. But we also see that in say Doctor Who with the Dalek invasion of Earth, and how these two species ended up.
I hope I have it right, but I think I remember that episode of Star Trek with, I think one of the stars was Frank Gorshin, mm-hmm. who was an impressionist back in the 60s. Right. And there were characters on that world that were fighting one another out of racist intent. One character was on the left side, white and black on the right side, while the other one was black on the left side and white on the right. Mm-hmm. And they were mirror images of one another, but yet they were fighting each other as if they wanted to get rid of the other one.
Right,
you know?
right. It's kind of like seeing a pair of twins and going, well, which one was the original twin? And now they're duking out to figure out which one was the original, which one is the clone, quote unquote.
Right.
Which you might see in I think it was Invincible on Prime. I think they had. I could be mistaken, but and so. How did this? So, did this affect your writing directly? Do you feel like it affected it indirectly, Sandy? How did you approach the story? And it's.
I think it's insidious. I think it just.
I agree.
Because it's all around us that it naturally seeps into everything we do.
Right. I mean, we're not, as authors, we're not apart from the society. We're part of the society. And so we have our opinions, and we see the opinions of others, and sometimes we might magnify various points in the story. And it happens. It happens like that.
And sometimes as writers, if you're in a position in your natural environment to be suppressed, when you're writing, it allows you to have a voice.
And so for new writers who are out there, for our dear listeners and readers and dear writers who are struggling to create their first, or for those veterans who are out there, should you set out to do social commentary, or is there a matter of forcing the issue?
You know what? I think sometimes it's necessary. You may want to start out. It's just like even a very old story like Gulliver's Travels, written by Jonathan Swift. A century or two ago. It was a social commentary on how the British, would conquer a smaller nation.
Yes.
And then what would it be like if that happened to them?
Right.
Because Gulliver went to the Lilliputians, but he also went the other way to the land of giants,
right,
too. So what would it be like if you were conquered? Like, how would you like that? So even as far back as then.
So dear listeners and readers, if you listen to the podcast, you know that for some reason I start a lot of conversations with so. Oh, there.
That's
when let's say that you've decided, okay, social commentary, this is something I'm going to touch upon in my sci-fi fantasy fiction. I'm going to write Star Trek and talk about how money is the bane of humanity, and we need to focus on education, and we need to free ourselves of money and focus on our advancement. So let's say this is the topic you want to cover. Do you write it out and say, okay, I'm going to go here, 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 or do you just let it drive itself, as you would say, you often say, let it drive the story?
Well, overall, overarching all of this is your outline.
Right.
I wanted to say that. And after that, you hang ornaments on this Christmas tree of an outline. Because, for instance, if you're writing about Spock, for instance, and his society who gave up emotion and decided they wanted to go for something higher.
For logic.
Logic, yeah. Of course, this is the direction you're going to take it, because that's what you intend to do.
It's interesting you say that, because when you think about Spock and Star Trek, I think that there's sort of a double commentary going on, because we often have this back and forth between Kirk and Spock about, letting his emotions take over, and wanting to be logical about things. I think the commentary here is that you can't always be logical, and Spock's commentary might be that there are oftentimes things call for logic, and you can't be emotional about things.
But I think there has to be a balance, and I think that's one of the things that between these two characters they were trying to stress, that we need a balance between those things. Sometimes one is overemphasized, which causes problems. How would you like to have, for instance, a machine or a computer as a judge, for instance,
Right.
he would have no mercy because the law is the law is the law, and this is the way it's going to be. Even though you stole a loaf of bread to feed your starving family, it was a theft. It sounds like something like out of Les Miserables,
And we talk about, and as we're talking about social commentary, it's not, dear listeners and readers, it's not because, there was a point to be made necessarily. It's not that, Nicholas is not a soapbox. It is not, they don't talk about subjects and, beat you over the head with it. It's just part of the story that's in there, and you'll either see it or you won't. How important was it? How were you, Sandy, how did you write the story without, again, as I said, sort of beating people over the head and, soapboxing any sort of commentary that might be about diversity or love or,
Because I approached it as a recognition of all the facets of society.
Right.
Every if you look at it like a snowflake or crystals or a puddle.
Right.
But go on.
Every individual, every type of person, type of thing, type of oddling, type of being and culture,
Right.
tends to change the culture that you're dealing with.
It's a ripple effect, yeah.
It is
Well,
a ripple effect.
and I think in the story there's just subtlety, and as you said, it's not beating somebody over the head with it, but it happens to show up every now and again that there may be something that relates to real life, and we can show examples of how it matches or mismatches with the situation in the story.
And to your point, it is to show that this is, in the end of at the end of the day, this is a living, breathing, magical, exciting,
It's an entity.
vibrant world that you've created.
Right.
And in order to have a world that is believable, that is immersive, that we can relate to, that, as you say before, as often on the show, resonates with your readers and with yourselves, you have to have these things.
Right.
Because society, in my opinion, it has to learn, and it has to learn by watching both sides, of the court, so to speak.
And I think in our story, you get to witness the pursuit of unbridled greed, pursuit of power.
Right.
And you see the controls that try to put that in order,
Right.
so that doesn't happen, and you see that, and you see what can happen when things go extremely wrong, and how they can correct when something has to be applied, when the brake has to be applied to it.
How the temperances can calm the waters.
Yeah. And I think that if we are to write a good story, if we're right to be successful storytellers, whether we like it or not, social commentary in some aspect has to be involved, because it is, in the story, in my opinion, a medium through which our characters evolve. It is what shapes them, it's what shapes their world, and it's how they learn to puzzle it out. And in other words, they learn how to, solve their own problems, so to speak. But also, too, for our readers, I think it helps them to think about perhaps things in their own world and maybe how they can affect change or be better or, provoke thought.
And I think if it didn't relate to the reader, then it wouldn't be so interesting.
Right.
I think it's interesting because it does, because we can see a part of ourselves in that story.
Yes.
Because we fall in love. We've had bad things happen to us. We've had good things happen to us. We've met people who are at the extremes and cause difficulty for everybody. And we've met people who put that back in order again. So you'll see that in this story.
Yes, and you can You can live that. You can be that. I guarantee you, when you pick up the book and you open the page and you begin to read, you won't be able to stop. It will grasp you. And if you want to see what it's like to fall in love, if you want to experience camaraderie, if you want to see how bad things can take root and good can take over, pick up a book of How Nicholas Became Santa Claus. Visit our website at troopbooks.com. Visit our Instagram, our Facebook, our X. And if you like the book, put a comment on the website. If you like the topics, let us know. Maybe we'll talk about something at info@troopbooks.com. Email us, let us know, and perhaps we'll talk to you next time on Conversations with the Authors.